Hello and welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be covering topics under the standard 2.2b in 5th grade and also topics under the Study Island lesson titled Add and Subtract Fractions. So we're going to be looking at how to add and subtract fractions when they have common denominators and when the denominators are different. So you want to make sure that you take notes on how to do each of those scenarios, and then if I ever go too fast, just pause and rewind the video and get caught back up. And you can even pause at the beginning of a question, work that problem out yourself, and then watch the video and see if we get the same answers. And make sure that you are showing all your work when you try it so that you can see where it is that you made a mistake or see that you did everything correctly. So I'm so glad that you are joining us today, and let's go ahead and take some notes.
So first let's look at how you add fractions with like denominators. So if you add fractions with like denominators, you're just going to add the tops. And if you are going to subtract fractions with like denominators, then you just subtract the tops and the denominators carry through. And here's a couple of examples. So if you are going to be adding or subtracting with different denominators, you're going to have to change it to an equivalent fraction with a common denominator and then add. So here I had 3 and 4. I can find a common denominator of 12 for both of those, write the equivalent fractions with that are equal to the originals with a denominator of 12, and then I add the top. So just an extra step. So here in this first problem, both of my fractions have the same denominator, so that means I can just go ahead and add the top. 1 plus 1 is 2, and then I carry the denominator through, so 2/10 is my final answer, which is choice B. Now I'm looking at adding fractions, but I don't have a common denominator. So my denominators here are 3 and 6. So I know if I take 3 times 2, that can get me to 6, and then they would be the same. So that means this first fraction here, I'm going to have to multiply the top and the bottom by 2 to keep the fraction equal and equivalent. So 1 times 2 is 2, and 3 times 2 is 6, and then I'm still adding that to the second fraction of 2 over 6. So now that they have the same denominator, I can just add the tops. 2 plus 2 is 4, and the common denominator 6 carries through, but I don't see 4, 6 as an answer. That's because I can simplify it. Both 4 and 6 are even numbers, so that means I can divide the top and bottom by 2. And when I do that, I get 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that fraction reduces to 2 over 3, 2/3, which is choice B, my final answer. Now I'm looking at subtracting fractions with the same denominators. So I have 13 and 13 on the bottom, so that means my answer when I subtract these is also going to have a 13 in the denominator, and then I just subtract the tops. 5 minus 1 is 4, so 4/13, choice D, is going to be my final answer. Now I'm looking at subtracting fractions when I have different denominators. So I'm looking at 6 and 12, and I'm thinking, what can be the smallest common denominator? Well, now if I multiply 6 by 2, that's going to get me to 12. So I'm going to have to write a new fraction that shows the top and the bottom multiplied by 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, and 6 times 2 is 12, and then I'm going to subtract that from the second fraction, which stays the same, 2 over 12. So when I'm subtracting fractions, the bottom stays the same, and I subtract the tops. 4 minus 2 is 2. I don't see 2/12 in my answer, so that means I'm probably going to simplify. Well, 2 and 12 are both even, so I can divide the top and bottom by 2. And when I divide 2 divided by 2, that equals 1, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. 1 over 6 is going to be my final answer, which is A. Now I am looking at adding mixed numbers. When adding mixed numbers, I still have to have the same denominator. So here I have a 6 and a 6 in the denominator, so that's good. But now when I add mixed numbers, I'm going to add the big part, which is the whole part, and just add the numerators to numerators. So here, whole to whole is 5 plus 5, which is 10. And then I'm going to have numerators, which is 3 plus 1 is 4. And then that denominator stays the same. So 10 and 4 6, choice C is going to be my final answer. Now looking at subtracting mixed numbers, here I'm going to go ahead and subtract my whole part. So that's going to be 10 minus 5 is 5. And then I subtract my numerators by the numerators. 4 minus 2 is 2. And then my denominator just carries through, which is a 4 in both of them. And 5 and 2/4, choice B, is going to be my final answer. My last problem, I'm looking at adding a mixed number without having the common denominator. So I look in 4 and 3, the smallest common denominator I can make there is 12. So that means to get to 12, I'm going to have to multiply the top and bottom by 3 here. And I'm going to have to multiply the top and bottom by 4 in the second fraction. So when you have a mixed number, the whole part, the big part, does not get multiplied by 3. It just carries through. And then you multiply 1 times 3 is 3, and 4 times 3 is that 12 I needed. And then I'm going to add it to 1 times 4 is 4, and 3 times 4 is 12. And then I just go ahead and add whole parts with whole parts and numerators with numerators. So 1, and there's no whole part here, so it would be 0, and 1 plus 0 is 1. And then I'm going to add the numerators. 3 plus 4 is 7, and then that 12 denominator carries through, and that's going to make A, 1 and 7/12 my final answer. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something new.